we're going to be moving into our last piece, which is the micro workshops. So the micro workshops aim to create a space for brief but personal interactions and information sharing or discussion, as well as the opportunity for application of concepts and ideas shared with a hands-on learning component. So again, we've had wonderful faculty and staff from around the college volunteer to create these micro workshops. And just a reminder to speakers that we have Bert again as the timekeeper. He has the toughest job of all of us today. So he will give you a 2-minute warning in the chat, and then he will turn his camera on and unmute himself and let you know if you've gotten to the end of your time and introduce the next speaker. But with that, I will introduce our first group, which does include Bert. So we have Linda Thomason and Bert Slesser with Teaching Transformation, Engaging Students with OneNote.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. And I am going to start my own clock here, and I'll have to give myself my own 2-minute warning, I think, if I go over, or someone else can let me know to go over. I'm going to start right now, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, just a quick thumbs up that everybody can see that. Awesome. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Bert Slesser. I work in the CTL as an instructional design technologist, and I'm a part-time faculty in the communications program area, where I work with my colleague here, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Thomason, and like Bert said, I am a communications faculty in the liberal arts department.
And Linda and I are excited to share what we know about OneNote as a way to transform your teaching and engage your students. So a quick agenda or key points, we're going to cover what is OneNote if you don't know what it is, why use it, and then OneNote engagement strategies, and we'll also fit in a quick demonstration. So OneNote is a digital notebook that can be accessed through Microsoft and or a learning management system integration. So the notebook can be used as a content library to store class-related documents, as a private space for students to work through material, or a collaborative space with shared notebooks. The big question is, why use OneNote? And OneNote I see as an opportunity to engage students through a unique experience. So first, OneNote offers a single location for all documents. So that's things like your lecture notes, group notes, worksheets, handouts, etc. And what I like to think of it is an organized area for shared or private information. This just makes it easier for students to find and engage in the content. The second is professors can engage their students with individual or group feedback, but you can do it in real time. So this means that you can write notes into their work as they're working on the task. So whether it's, like I said before, lecture notes, group notes, worksheets, handouts, you can give efficient formative feedback and engage the students' motivation and ability to learn. And then third, it's one of the easiest tools to set up that offers customizable student spaces. It gives you sections, pages, and templates, and it's a simple way for students just to access almost like an infinite space for them to interact with content. And then lastly on here, I make note that it's a flexitive collaborative space. So students can use OneNote from anywhere, anytime, whether it's computer, tablet, phone. If you want to engage your students, you can make their work individualized and accessible. So great for a flex class. I'll pass it over to Linda.
Thank you. So like our keynote speaker mentioned this morning, the more students can interact with content, the more engaged they will be. So in the next couple of slides, we're just going to show you some ways that students can use OneNote to interact with the content, each other, and their instructor. So next slide, please, Bert. Okay, so in OneNote, there is a collaborative or shared space that all students can access and edit. And then there are also private individual notebooks that only each student and their teacher can access and edit. So the shared space is a wonderful opportunity for collaborative work between groups or as a whole class. And the individual notebooks are a great chance for students to capture lecture notes, to complete chapter readings, or maybe practice any assignments or simple tasks that you want them to work on during class. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, the individual student notebooks are great for independent study. Students can use these. They can add images, they can add text, they can add links to videos. They can study any information that they need for their course. And like Bert mentioned, this is your opportunity to add that formative feedback. So if you're teaching a flex format or a synchronous online course, you can be adding feedback on the pages that the students are working on in real time. If this is an asynchronous course, you can be going in, at the end of the week and adding feedback. So you can see students working on these things as they're practicing the content. Okay, and the next slide, please. And again, Bert already mentioned this, but we want to make sure that this is clear. OneNote is a cloud-based product. So it saves automatically, which is fantastic. You don't have to worry about anyone not saving their work or losing the links as well. And it's flexible. So you can use it from different modalities and different devices, which makes it a great tool for faculty and students. So I'm going to pass it back over to Bert, and he's going to start a demonstration.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So assuming everybody can still see my screen. So in Blackboard, I'm just going to show you how to create that LMS integration. You can go into your course content area. You can go into content market. And I know I'm rushing through this a little bit, but just for the sake of time, you can click on OneNote class notebook. And in here, I just want to demonstrate how simple it is to create a class notebook that integrates with your class. It automatically creates a notebook for every single student. This wants to know if I want to create a new one, and I'll say demo. Next. So I put in the name of my class. For this time, I just put in demo, and then it gives you an idea of the collaboration space, the content library, teacher only section, and student notebooks. All of this is going to be in one single notebook. And it will give you a description of who can edit and who cannot. So for example, the teacher only section, you might want to use that as a staging area, but that will be the teacher can edit content. So then if you're teaching or co-teaching, like teaching a 618 or co-teaching with somebody, you can add that teacher's email address in there, so it can both be added to the notebook, and then automatically add students' names from the LMS. Next. And then you can add certain sections. So if you wanted to add a section for a journal or a specific lecture notes, you can do that as well. And this is what the students will get. I click next. This gives you an idea of what your notebook is going to look like. You would also have a list of all your students underneath, and then the student's notebook would look like this, and they'd have handouts, class notes, etc. I click on create, and it would set up my notebook. Once your notebook is set up, if I can go back to my tab here. Just want to get to my Blackboard tab. So once your notebook is set up, and it just takes a few minutes there, you can go back to this page here and click the plus icon, and that plus icon will add your notebook to the student. To the course content area. I'm going to pass this over to Linda, who can show what it looks like from a student's and teacher's perspective. And we have 2 minutes, Linda. We're at the 8-minute mark.
I'm muted?
You're just
okay.
muted.
Can you see my screen?
Got it.
Okay, perfect. So Bert and I just wanted to show you what, kind of a completed notebook looks like. So I started using OneNote during the pandemic because I wanted to recreate those collaborative activities that I would normally do in a face-to-face class, but in an online environment. And I also love the idea of being able to, look over a student's shoulder and see what they're working on and offer some feedback. And so OneNote is the tool that I use to do that. So this is one of my notebooks. So when students come in, they're going to see a welcome message that just reminds them of the collaborative space and the individual notebook. And so I'll just show you, this here is the sections that I have created. So I have a welcome, a collaboration space, content, and teacher only. This is where I can create content for my students. So when I open up the collaboration space, you can see that this is the space that I use most often with my students. I organize it into weeks, like we organize our semester. And when I click on a week, here is a page for that week. So this is a discussion board, or my version of a discussion board. I like to be able to see how multiple students answer questions on one page. That layout is very attractive to me. So this is what the students would see. They're going to come in each week, click on the week, and then basically answer the questions or complete the task that I've set up for them. One activity that I have students do is something like this, where they're in groups and each group is assigned a page. They come in, they answer the information related to topics we've been discussing in class. And then this is the content that I use for an assignment. So their assignment answers come directly from the content that they have created together by talking about their experiences or the topics that we've done in class. So I will wrap it up and stop sharing so that we can wrap this up. But we're happy to talk about this further and answer any questions. People can reach out to us if they'd like to know more.
And we can share the slide deck with the CTL team for resources, or again, to contact Linda and I. So I'm going to thank Linda and for the great presentation. And then I'm going to pass it over to Laura and Andre and Kelly.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that my partners in crime are online.
We are here.
Hi, everybody. All right, so I am sharing my screen, and hopefully for everybody, what you see is International Virtual Exchange. Super. Thank you, folks. All right. I heard Laura. Andre, you're there too?
I am.
Yay. Okay. We're doing really well so far, so this is great. All right. Thank you, everybody. I just want to say, firstly, what a great day. You never really know how these days are going to go and what is involved, and you can see a schedule and you can read through that. But it has been 100 times more than anything I could have anticipated. So thank you again for the organizers, and thank you for inviting us and allowing us to speak on International Virtual Exchange. So before we get started, I will just quickly introduce myself. My name is Kelly Fox. I am a faculty developer with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I currently am on secondment with the International Department. So that's all I want to say about that. And I'll turn it over to Andre.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andre Sanche. I am a teacher here in the culinary department for HTR. I have been here for 10 years. I have owned several restaurants, and my next adventure is into virtual exchanges with our students, giving them a better experience with real life chefs.
Super, Andre. And then Laura.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Koza, and I am a faculty in the recreation department. And I have been with Georgian in a handful of different roles for about 8 or 9 years. And I feel so grateful to be able to get to do what I do every day and connect with the students to hopefully bring them some joy and connect into what they're doing and how they can sort of build those cultural competencies moving forward.
All right, thanks, Laura. Okay, so folks, in our presentation, we wanted to talk about International Virtual Exchange as a means of engagement, because that was the theme or the topic for the conference today. We don't really have a lot of time in the short little micro lesson that we're going to offer to really go into much around the literature around virtual exchange. And another term you might hear is also COIL, or collaborative online virtual learning. I have a definition on the screen, which is essentially virtual exchange is a meaningful, high quality educational experience that allows students to interchange ideas, to reflect on the diversity of different cultures and create collaborative content with others basically all around the world. That's a really, really broad definition of virtual exchange. And today we've seen a lot of different opportunities for engagement. And I see also sort of cascading through some of those examples has also been a connection where you could make a connection for virtual exchange as well. So without taking too much time, we do have some slides if you are interested to learn more about virtual exchange. We'll share that information or the evidence or the research later. But really, we have some pretty coveted time with Andre and Laura. So I really want to make sure that they get their time to share their stories with you. So rather quickly, what have we been up to? At Georgian College, we have created this micro certificate around global teaching and learning. And involved in that micro certificate, initially from January to April, folks, a pilot group, so a small group of folks, were introduced to 3 asynchronous modules. The first module was the introduction to virtual exchange. What is it? They also were introduced to the UN Sustainable Goals, or the SDGs. And the third one was intercultural knowledge and communication. And you can see on the screen, there is a little logo that says ATU. Those 3 modules were developed with our preferred partner, Atlantic Technology University in Ireland. So that was really quite fun. So that was developed together. Then in May, June of this particular year, and we literally just finished last week, so that was kind of fun, we brought together the pilot group, and we had an opportunity for an in-person, in-class 5-week session whereby folks actually got to dig in and design or develop what we're calling IVEL, or virtual exchange pilot, or a virtual exchange project. So the idea then would be in the fall or winter, whatever fits for those folks, would be actually an implementation. Once all those things are satisfied, then those folks are eligible for the micro certificate in global teaching and learning. More importantly, I am going to turn it over, and we're going to start with Laura. And Laura's just going to share a little bit of her experience of going through this process.
Yes, hello everybody. So as Kelly so beautifully said, we just had the opportunity to sort of learn asynchronously and then come together as a group of faculty and basically rebuild one of our courses to include this international virtual component. And I'm so excited because the course that I had the opportunity to look into was a recreation course called Inclusive and Adaptive Recreation, which to me is such this beautiful alignment in how do we look at inclusion, how do we build cultural competencies, how do we build sort of this feeling of equity, diversity, belonging into our teaching practices and foster this sort of really authentic, engaging experience for our students. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm working through it. And I am really excited to sort of build this project that is founded in how do we find joy in taking care of ourselves. So what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to partner with a school in the healthcare field and sort of use their knowledge and expertise around health sciences to have my students sort of write a social prescription or write a recreation program around how do we really create a practice that is truly centered in recreation about taking care of ourselves. So how do we foster that joy? And sort of through creating this project, a couple of things that I have found is one, there's such a natural alignment to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Anytime we're sort of building in these authentic learning experiences, it's so easy to say, how can we really connect to the work that's happening around us and beyond us through the United Nations? So for me, there was a beautiful alignment with the good health and well-being. Well, also this idea of we just had this amazing opportunity to connect with maybe 15-ish other faculty in a really in a traditional classroom setting, and something that I think we don't get the opportunity to do often as faculty. We're so often asked to sort of stand at the front of the classroom and be the ones with the knowledge and the expertise. So to sort of take that student role and to connect with other faculty and to really engage in my own learning and my own personal growth and my own sort of connection to cultural competencies and build out a lot of these personal competencies, I feel like really gives me the authentic sort of experience that to then sort of bring that to the students. Gone are the days of the like, do as I say, not as I do, and to sort of go through this experience and authentically learn and grow as a human, and then show up to my students and say, hey, this is my first time. We'll see how it goes. And I want to tell you my experiences and all the times that I failed and sort of show up to that challenge with them. I think really builds that authentic experience. I'm hoping, anyways, we'll see how it actually goes in the fall. As well as offers this really great chance for our students to build these real world connections. It's so easy to say, hey, imagine what would happen in the future in the industry. As a professional, you're going to do this. So much of what we do as faculty is potentially 1 to 2 years away for the students. As a professional, you're going to do this, where this experience is really in the now of to say, how can we sort of support you through this experience to build, to learn, to grow, which is sort of the fundamental of going to school, so that when you have those opportunities in the future, you are set up for success. We live in a world where globalization is happening. We are seeing sort of everybody from many, many different cultures show up in every workplace. So offering real-time, real-world examples for our students to connect with that, I think is so valuable. And I think that's all for me. Andre, I think I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's really interesting. When I was approached with the concept of the IVAL and the pilot project, it was, to me, a perfect fit for a course that we're already offering, a developing regional cuisine, where our students are tasked with creating a menu that is focusing on regional cuisine of anywhere in the world, as broad or as vast as they'd like. And they create a menu, they do all of the restaurant side of it, they do the costing, all of that, and then they deliver it at the end of the semester. And what working with IVAL will allow us to do is to actually connect our students directly with a chef from that region, or with students eventually from that region. So what we'll do this semester in the fall is we're developing relationships with 4 different regions across the world. We've got 2 nailed down, and I think the other 2 are on their way. But these students will get to work directly with a chef and discuss what regionality means to them, what those ingredients are, what those influences are. So for those of you who have any interest in food, ingredients are really influenced by, geographic influences, by historical, by religious, different things that lend a role when establishing what ingredients are used in what area. If you live near the sea, you will inevitably have a ton of seafood or those kinds of things in your menus. And this gives them an authentic look at what it is. And for any instructors who see it, you're always looking for a subject matter expert. And although I know all of these things, my students come to me and sometimes they think to themselves, well, you're the instructor. But when you bring somebody in who's German and you speak to German food, they all of a sudden think, wow, like this is real, this is authentic. And so then they end up engaging with these other members in our community, in the culinary community, in a more in-depth way. And I think that they'll get a better sense of food and all of those influences and that global engagement that we'll bring to them. What it does for me, and that's the student part, but at the same time, as a professional, it broadens my network hugely. So if I work with 4 partners this year and say 2 or 3 new partners the following year, and the more we grow, the more worldly that experience becomes, and the more those connections can bring more to the table for your students. And although this course is about regional cuisine, it's not necessarily about our region, in that we're growing beyond that and finding real enriching experiences for them to be able to elaborate on their culinary learning. So to me, it's a perfect fit on that front. And it really is that authentic engagement with professionals across the globe. Off to you,
Awesome.
Kelly.
Thank you. Laura and Andre, they bring such an enthusiasm for virtual exchange. And one of the real benefits to virtual exchange, if I could just add a little bit to that, would be the opportunity for students, just like on the screen here, is for that opportunity for global engagement. And just like Rob Terrio talked about, the opportunity to explore into other worlds or other opportunities in a safe way, in a controlled way. Virtual exchange also is an opportunity to bring global opportunities and global experiences to students without mobility. So without the cost of mobility, without the challenges of sending somebody abroad, and albeit those are really great experiences, it's not to say that they're not, but the opportunity for virtual exchange is a real opportunity to connect global communities, international connections, international cultures with our students in particular. I'll speak for Georgian College, with our students here. Again, there's a whole bunch of research and evidence around the value of it as well. So Andre and Laura have been excellent examples of why it's awesome, why it's a great opportunity for faculty. And interestingly, they both talked about the opportunity for engagement of themselves as well. So this was kind of like a little bit of a spark to add to, what am I going to do in my classroom? How am I going to engage my students and so on? So I know that 15 minutes is not a lot of time, and I've heard lots of people say today, I normally might do this in an hour. We did 5 weeks, and it was a 21-hour course to talk about IVAL, so 15 minutes is really just a quick teaser. But if folks are interested and do want to learn a little bit more, this is a Padlet. There's a little bit of information, and I also will put my email address in the chat if anybody wants to chat more about it. And we're happy to carry on the conversation. A big thank you to Andre and Laura for taking the time today to share your story. And I think we are good for time. Did we do it, Bert?
Yeah, you're rocking. You got it. That's awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Andre. And thanks, Laura. All right. Next up, we have Christy and Deborah. I will pass it over to you two.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to see Christy, if you want to share the slides, and or I could share them. Oh, perfect. Okay. Awesome. And if you want to put it on presentation mode.
There we go. I was muted, and I'm so
okay.
sorry. Is it
Okay.
on, because it's in presentation mode on my screen? Can you see it in presentation mode, or?
No, it's
Okay. Let me do it again. If not, I'll send it to you.
no worries.
Okay. There. Is that in? Does that now
there
work?
you go.
All
That's
right.
awesome.
Okay,
Yes,
that's good.
perfect.
Sorry. We're still
All
on
right.
time.
There we
We're
go.
still on time. It's 2:29.
Good thing we got the extra time.
Yeah.
I'll start the clock just a little bit later, so you have
Okay.
enough
All
time.
right. Thanks. Okay.
Hi.
All right.
All right. So I'll go ahead and kind of do the introduction and just let everybody know what we're doing today. So Christy and I are here to talk about creating inclusive classrooms and addressing microaggressions to enhance the student engagement. And the EDIB office has often talked about microaggressions with coworkers, with colleagues. We've talked about it in the classroom as well, but this is kind of a micro presentation to talk about engaging with the material as it relates to microaggressions. If you go back to the agenda, Christy, I'll do that real quickly so folks know what we're doing. What we're going to do first is we're going to define what microaggressions are. We are going to talk about microaggressions in the classroom. We're going to give you kind of some guidelines to really think about as you address microaggressions in the classroom. And we are hopefully going to have some time to do a scenario or two where we'll kind of engage in a conversation about a scenario, and we will talk about how we can all work on really addressing the microaggression in the scenario and how that might relate to you in the classroom as well. And then we could take any final questions and just talk about what happens next. So that is the agenda, and we've got 14 minutes to do it, so we'll do it. So let's start off with what are microaggressions? And we wanted to just kind of give you this kind of baseline definition of what microaggressions are, just in case those of you don't know, can learn a little bit about what they are, and it might be a refresher to the rest of you who do know what they are. So microaggressions are small, almost daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental slights and insults. What they are they are insults. They are insults, and they can be defined as subtle, stunning, often automatic, and non-verbal exchanges, which can be put downs. And they systematically exclude groups of people. And they can be experienced by racial minorities, women, people from queer communities, disabled communities, and all parts of identities. They target historically marginalized groups. So you can see some examples of what microaggressions are on the screen here, such as, are you a man or a woman? Or you natives don't have to work. Doesn't the government give you everything for free? Or you're going to stay home with the baby. Are you really going to let your wife wear the pants in the relationship? Another one here is, do you know where I can buy marijuana? Right? And you're just looking at the pictures and looking at why those questions are asked to that person can really give you an idea of what microaggressions are. And as I said, historically marginalized people are targets of these microaggressions. They also are intentional or unintentional, right? And regardless if they are intentional or unintentional, they still really, really hurt. They are often dismissed or glossed over as being innocent or just, well, you know I'm not racist, or you know I'm not sexist or homophobic. And then they kind of get dismissed when that is said, right? And we talk about microaggressions because there's nothing really micro about them, right? And they may be really subtle, they may be small, but they're nothing short of discriminatory and hurtful. And it's like getting bitten by mosquitoes multiple times every day. You think about getting a mosquito bite and how it's irritating and it's itchy. Think about getting bitten by a mosquito multiple times over and over and over again, or a paper cut. You know, one paper cut's bad enough, but imagine getting cut by a paper cut over and over and over again. So like microaggressions, right? They may be small, but they are still very, very hurtful. So that's examples of microaggression. And Christy, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so why are we talking about this today? It's been an ongoing question and request for the office, but also because it really does matter for student engagement. And studies show that when we have microaggressions in the classroom and they go unaddressed, it causes psychological stress for students and faculty. It decreases self-esteem for people who are targeted, but it also reduces participation, it diminishes academic performance, and it decreases students' persistence. So this is the reason why we're talking about it and why it's so important for a good classroom student engagement to address microaggressions. And why you can take preventive measures. We're focusing today on how to manage them when they show up in a class or in a classroom setting. So we just wanted to offer some guidelines for that, and then we want to go to the scenarios. But these are some basic guidelines that are offered in the moment when you're faced with a microaggression. What can you do? What can you say? How can you respond? How can you get a fruitful conversation going so that you create a safe environment again in the classroom? So it's divided. It's called taking action guideline or framework. And
Yep.
it breaks down. Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, so the A in action is to ask clarifying questions to assist with understanding their intentions, right? So whether it is unintentional or intentional, ask some clarifying questions. So such as, I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. Were you saying that ... Or sometimes you might want to repeat back what they said, or slowly, or maybe when you say it back to them, or just ask for clarifying information. You might get different feedback, or have them really consider and think about what they've just said. The C is for carefully listen. So you might want to say, can you please help me understand what you meant by that? Or, I'm glad to hear I misunderstood you, because as you know, some comments can be ... Keep asking questions. Clarify, right? What do you mean by that? Oftentimes when you're doing that and you have them really think about what they said, you can really engage in fruitful conversation about that microaggression that was committed.
All right. And then the third step is to tell others what you observed as a microaggression, to basically make it explicit. I noticed that whatever was said, whatever was done, make it explicit by saying, I noticed that this happened. And then the fourth step, the impact exploration, is where you ask or state the potential impact from microaggression. Very often, people who commit microaggressions are not necessarily aware. So just to get them thinking by asking, what do you think people think when they hear that type of comment? And then the next step would be, once you've kind of explored the impact, to say, okay, so when I hear you say that, this is what I feel, this is what I think. So basically own your thoughts and feelings on the matter. And after stating your thoughts or feelings, move to the last step, which is explore the next steps. Request appropriate action to be taken. So basically it means like our classroom is a learning environment. When you say such comments, it's really problematic for people to focus because people get offended. So I'm going to ask you to refrain from stating your thoughts in that manner in the future. You can do it. This is just a sample. Obviously, you use your own words, but the idea is to say, like, this is not, when you say this, it's not really safe for everyone. So please refrain from doing that in the future. So I'm going to post these in the chat, and then we're going to move to the next. We just wanted to really go to the workshop part of this and go for a scenario and then have people go through those steps. What would you do when this happens in the classroom? All right. So I'll just
I'm going to post that. Yeah.
Yes. Can you read the scenario, Deb, while I try to post
yes.
it?
And again, the scenario is here, and it's these are kind of not really guidelines or framework, but just to kind of help support you in being able to address the microaggressions, because in the end of it, microaggressions often go uncommented, unnoticed, unchallenged, because people don't know what to say. So this is really to help you and help you know what to say, but at the end to really understand that we got to say something, and saying something is much better than saying nothing. So let's talk about this first scenario. Sorry, Christy, you got something on the screen here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just
okay.
I'm moving.
Oh, it's okay. I was gonna read it. Okay.
There you go. I just posted it. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing. Oh no, I shouldn't. Sorry. I'm not gonna stop sharing.
You wanna just X out of that thing that you have on the screen there, and then they can see the scenario. And as you do that, I will read it. So Professor, you okay?
Yeah.
All right. Professor Tremblay is standing in front of the classroom discussing the history of residential schools and their long-term effects on Indigenous communities. Professor Tremblay says residential schools were institutions where Indigenous children were forcibly removed from their families and communities. They were subjected to harsh conditions, including physical, emotional, and cultural abuse. The legacy of these schools has a profound effect on Indigenous people, affecting multiple generations. The student says, Professor Tremblay, I don't understand why Indigenous people can't just get over it. It couldn't have been that bad. How do you address or begin to address this particular microaggression? And maybe, want to argue that it isn't a microaggression, and then we could talk about why it is, but how would you address this in the classroom setting? And if you wanted to, I know we got a lot of people here, so if you want to come off of mute, sure, but if you want to put it in the chat as well, so we can have a conversation. And I believe, Christy, you put in the chat.
Yeah, I did. I just,
Okay.
yes, sorry. I forgot to press. Yes, there we
Okay,
go.
no worries.
I
All right.
forgot to
So there are
set it
the
up.
steps, right? Asking clarification questions, carefully listen, tell others what you observed as microaggressions, own your own thoughts and feelings, and next steps. So how would we address this particular?
What clarifying question can you start asking?
And again, you put it in the chat if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah.
You can do that as well. So Amy says, ask the student what they know about residential schools. I like that. I think it's important to really kind of, it's challenging the student, but actually asking them, what do they know? What do you understand about residential schools? Yeah. Tracy says, ask where they've learned this information from. It's a good one. Yeah, because definitely understanding, is this coming from just what they've heard about the Indigenous people or residential schools? Yeah. Melanie, tell me more about what you do not understand. Love that. Can you please elaborate on why you believe it wasn't that bad? Good question.
Yeah.
And what is bad, right? Because, yeah. I have found great learning from listening to the personal narrative of Indigenous people. So I would ask them if they have ever spoken with someone about their lived experiences. Great. I love that. Love that. Do they have any oh, sorry, I was just going to finish.
No, go ahead. No, yeah, no,
okay.
finish reading.
Do they have any family or personal connections to residential schools? Great questions. Christy.
And then like after listening, regardless of and let's imagine two scenarios. In the first one, they say like, they don't acknowledge, they don't really acknowledge that it was a microaggression. How could you still kind of, after carefully listen, how could you still get the conversation going and saying like, when I hear you say that, I still, what could be the second step after carefully listening? How could you rephrase, tell others what you observed as a microaggression? I think that's an important step too, sometimes for oneself, where we actually have to think, what's the microaggression behind it?
Yeah. As folks consider that, I'll finish reading here. When you hear forcibly removed, how does that make you feel or react? Yeah. I usually ask my peers if I have overreacted. Oh, hey, that's a great one. Have you had something traumatic happen to you and were you told to get over it? Bringing it back to them, yeah. Yeah. And I think even just recognizing that this is a microaggression. We got 1 minute, but we'll go through.
Yep.
You want to go through one more scenario here?
Well, I think like, how can we move from there? How can we put it out there that it is a microaggression with like stating it in a way? Because now I feel like sometimes when we ask questions is putting it back on them, but when it's very much a learning experience, sometimes we can also say, when I hear you say that, this is what comes to mind. This is where it's problematic. I think that's an important step too.
Definitely.
And then I think the final step is also very important in setting appropriate boundaries moving forward. What can someone think of well, I think we're
yeah, we're one more minute. It's okay.
Yeah.
But even just putting it out there for
Mhm.
for folks to consider is what it would be the next action here. What would be the next thing to do here? Because you've addressed it, you've mentioned it. You got to define that it is a microaggression, and then what's next?
All right. Well, I've never had a micro workshop before, so that was very, very, very informative.
Got some good ones here.
All right. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
support to
boundary
change
plan.
behavior. Yeah, ask them to leave. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Boundary, applying values, judgments on things we have no personal experience. Yeah. Discuss a solution or method. Awesome.
All right. We can make the slides available, of course. And I think, yeah.
And we'd love to continue the conversation. So if you want to reach out, please
anytime.
Yes. Oh, get curious.
Yeah, that's great.
That.
Lots of applause and lots of thank yous in the chat. And thank you so much, Deborah and Christy. I know I'll speak for myself. I think it's such a relatable topic. And I think, in so many situations, I'll speak again for myself. I feel like I get tongue-tied sometimes. So having some practical solutions and some strategies to manage these types of scenarios is really, really helpful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Danielle Huerta, Accessibility Services 101, Inclusion and Engagement. And Danielle, I will pass it over to you. And just to be, we have about roughly like 15 minutes per person. So I will again give you the 2-minute warning as we get closer to that end of that.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to join. And I'm working off multiple monitors, so I'm going to try really hard to look into the camera. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So as introduced, my name is Danielle Poeta. I'm the Accessibility Advisor Lead for Georgian College on our Barrie campus. I'm just making sure that everything's going along. So quick check. Amy did a great job of this morning. So just kind of checking in just to make sure everybody can see me, hear me, see my slides. Amy did a great job of explaining how to open up those live captions. And then just connecting in and collaborating. So if we're ready to go, we can kind of start going. So it's nice to see thumbs up and get all this collaboration already. So thank you so much. And a quick agenda. Normally I do this and I'm already getting a clap. So that's awesome. Let's kind of set you guys up already. So quick snapshot of what I'm going to be going over. And normally I join various departments throughout the college to talk about accessibility services. And normally I have a longer period of time to connect and share this information. So I'll try to squeeze in as much as I can now. If I am going too fast, please let me know because I get excited about talking about accessibility services. So just give me a raised hand and I'll slow that down a little bit. I do have a couple scenarios that hopefully we can get through. If not, then I might try to skip through a couple slides because it is good and important information. So a little bit more about accessibility services. And for those that are not at Georgian College, that are other institutions, it's always good to know that there are always accessibility or disability services offices on all institutions, college and university. So What we primarily do as accessibility advisors, we're providing academic accommodations, information, support, advocacy for students who face physical, medical, sensory, mental health, and learning barriers to education. Here at Georgian, we're proud to be an inclusive educational institution and welcome a diverse population and actively work to ensure learning barriers are removed for all students while ensuring the academic quality and the essential learning requirements of our programs are maintained and accessible. And we are committed to working collaboratively with students, with staff and faculty in developing strategies to support a successful learning environment. So what does an accessibility advisor do? It's hard to give you a big snapshot of what we do on a day-to-day basis, but first and foremost, we are supporting our students. So we might be setting up individual academic accommodation plans and supports, which might include use of testing services, adaptive technology in classrooms. We might be looking at maybe case specific concerns due to a disability-related needs and functional limitations. We support students with many various study skills development tailored to each student and ways to overcome their functional limitation and support them in their academic learning environment. We may support and coordinate psychoeducational assessments, acquiring documentation for accommodations and funding, and then also looking at referrals to adaptive technology training, counseling, and then all kinds of various other supports and services within the college. One thing I always make sure to note for any faculty is in letting them know that accommodations do require the collaboration and the agreement between the student and accessibility services. So it is a student-initiated service. I'm a visual person, so I like to just kind of take a quick snapshot of what that might look like. So when we're looking at this, we see different things in our students because of our roles. So I'm looking at from, faculty side of things that you might see that tip, and I'm pointing to my screen and I'm not doing a great job here. You might see the tip of this iceberg that's outside of the water, and a lot of the information that may be shared with you might be in regards to class and academic performance. And then when we're looking at accessibility advisors, we might be looking at all this area beneath that surface. So we may get that snapshot that faculty provide to us that students tell us about in their classroom. But then we are discussing what's going underneath that water. So that might be confidential personal health information, how it impacts the learning. And this information cannot be shared and is determined to, is there to support and determine academic accommodations. So all of our institutions are guided by our Ontario Human Rights Commission policy on accessible education. So I can put the link down there later for full reading. So as an education provider, all educational institutions are considered a service under the Ontario Human Rights Commission under 5 social areas, and this does indicate a duty to accommodate for students with disabilities. As an educator, you have a responsibility to accommodate students with a disability under the OHRC. And requests for accommodations are made on a case-by-case basis and individual through each institution's accessibility or disability office. And we do require medical and or formal documentation outlining functional limitations and or impacts. So just a quick kind of snapshot of and letting really faculty know and staff and all these people who are supporters that students with disabilities are a diverse group and experience disability and impairments and societal barriers in so many different ways. Oftentimes this might be invisible or it might be episodic in nature, with sometimes students experiencing bouts of wellness and then maybe bouts of their disability. And all students with disabilities do have the same rights and equal opportunities under the code, whether their disability is visible or not. And then going into stats, I like to put out a few stats here, but 1 in 5 Canadians age 15 or older have experienced one or more conditions that have impacted or limited their daily activities. This is just a quick snapshot of kind of the process of a student registering with accessibility services. So again, this is from our Georgian lens. So first and foremost, students do have to reach out and connect in with accessibility services. And then going from there, you'll see lots of arrows because it's not just a fluid, you know, here to there. There may be different avenues that we might be looking to explore. So for example, once a student meets with an accessibility advisor, it might be a 1-hour appointment. It might be consisting of, you know, 3 appointments before we finally get an accommodation plan into place. And then that would go into our faculty. So that's where they would access that letter of accommodation outlining the very distinct accommodations for that student and how to best support them. We may also have to reach out to program coordinator and other department areas just to make sure that we're following the learning outcomes and looking at those essential components of that program and course. Clockwork, I'm just going to touch very quickly about because I know not everybody here might have access to this Clockwork. So this is our case management and database system. So this is a secure software that we use within accessibility services. And this is how we will send out those letters of accommodation. Some quick snapshot on types of accommodations. So again, this varies on a case-by-case basis, but these are kind of ones that you may see as a faculty member coming through. And that might be access to lecture material. So that might be recording, like what we're doing today. It might be professor providing lecture notes and lecture material not posted there. We might support students with assistive technology. So that might be class microphones where students have an FM system and the professor wears that microphone so that exemplifies for a student to hear. It might be text to voice or voice to text, and that might be supported with our adaptive technologist. Some environmental aids might be an accessible room, might be a supportive desk or chair. You may see a service animal or an ASL interpreter, possible lighting adjustments, and then going into assessment accommodations. So this might be occasional extensions on assignments, extra time on assessments or tests. So that might be on campus or online. Might be a distraction reduced environment. So writing in our testing services might again be breaks or assistive technology. Attendance that might look at missing classes or tests due to a disability, might be an adjustment of an assessment. So maybe re-looking at that a student may require 24 hours in between those tests. And then finally, we will support students with work integrated learning. So that would be helping for putting accommodations into place for placement, clinical, and co-op. One question that we get all the time is when to involve accessibility services. So when a student discloses a disability or functional limitation, please refer them to our office. We welcome connection in with faculty and love those student referrals. We also don't want you to have to be putting those accommodations into place because we also want to support and house that documentation within our secure database. So absences that extend beyond a week approximately and are more complex to navigate, that may be considered a temporary or interim accommodation or disability, and that can absolutely be referred into our services. So that might be a concussion, might be a surgery, etc. When we may not be required, that might be more for sickness, illness, or any typical reasons for absences that may not require our support. And then also just noting that every student and situation is unique. I've said this a couple times, but we always are open and welcome your input, questions, and collaboration with more complex situations. Bless you. Some quick examples. I'm just mindful of time, so I will quickly go through a couple examples here. So a scenario. So scenario 1, Taylor approaches you. So you as a faculty, Taylor approaches you with a medical note indicating that they need an adapted school schedule, requires reduced reading screen time, can participate for 2 to 3 hour time periods, and of academics with at least 30 to 60 minutes of rest in between. These directives are effective for 4 weeks, at which time Taylor will be reassessed by her doctor. You can see that Taylor is very upset and does not appear well. Taylor reports that they're doing their best, but is finding things very difficult since the accident. So I don't know if we can open this up. If you don't feel comfortable, by all means, I can kind of go through, but if there's any suggestions on how you would handle this situation with the student, and then I can also go on. So feel free if anyone wants to raise their hand, throw it in the chat. If not, I'll continue onwards. I'm mindful of time, so. Oh, perfect. Tracy, of course. I'm like, Tracy, I love this. Thank you. Okay, so what we would do first and foremost is referring students to accessibility services. So that's what we always want. Yes, refer. Yeah, thank you. Refer to accessibility services first and foremost. We absolutely want to do that. So Taylor would meet with an advisor. In that appointment, Taylor has disclosed and shared that they were actually in a vehicle accident and sustained minor physical injuries and suffered a concussion. The student has not been sleeping well due to pain and is feeling more anxious than usual after the accident. Has shared the doctor's note that they tried to provide to you, as well as additional documentation from their family doctor and a concussion clinic. So Taylor has had 2 previous concussion, understands how to recover and feels this one is not too severe, but also knows that recovery needs to be taken very serious and that doing too much can cause a setback for recovery. They're very concerned about completing their practical with long hours and feels that they can work up to 6 hours in total as long as they receive an hour break at the 3-hour mark. Taylor's less concerned about schoolwork as they're able to manage studying in chunks and can attend a class, but may need the odd extension while recovering. The next thing that we would do as an accessibility advisor, we might put some interim accommodations. So you'll notice here that we'll put interim accommodations to be discussed. And connecting in before the next term. So some accommodations might be recording of those lectures so that the student can take a break. They may have breaks. So this would be more of if a student arrives late or needs to leave, student may occasionally miss a class due to unavoidable circumstances. For on-campus tests, that's where they can access testing services, extra time for online quizzes and exams. So that would be time and a half, so 50%, extra time for practicals. Due to changes in accommodations, the student may occasionally request an extension, and we say may occasionally, and that should be negotiated with faculty prior and directly to before the due date. And then student may request an alternate date or time. And again, that will be discussed with the faculty member. I'm just going to jump into the next one because I'm worried about our time here. So just jumping in as I'm looking at this, for UGL, I always do a little shameless plug here, 2-minute warning, good. So I can go back and do a scenario, but I also want to leave it up to open to questions. So I always do a plug because I see Ian and Tracy was leaving. So UGL, I always do that, just letting everyone know UGL is better for anyone. Universal Design for Learning recognizes that every student learns in a unique way and involves, and that might include developing flexible ways to learn. This today is a great a showcase of UGL and providing you all kinds of great tools and techniques on supporting students, supporting anyone and everyone. Thanks, Ian. And then creating an engaging learning environment, option for multiple ways to meet expectations. Empowering faculty to think and work differently on their own teaching, and then focusing on educational outcomes. It recognizes for all, including persons with a disability. And what does that mean? So when an education system is not designed for inclusiveness, it emphasizes equal participation and recognizes that all students have varying abilities and needs. And as Kim had mentioned, in hers was not a one-size-fits-all approach. So what that might look like, I'm going to put it back to Linda and Bert because part of it is I normally showcase the collaborative note-taking approach, and you guys did such a great job with OneNote. I'm a big fan of OneNote. So that's just one way that you could be looking at ways to provide that. So students may be providing choice of assessments, various aspects. So just really looking at keeping things open. So for example, presentations in various ways, maybe being able to record this so that if I have a student with a concern, the faculty can read that or watch that at a different time. So I'm going to do some more plugs down here because our CTL is amazing. So there's all kinds of great resources there. And 2 of my other favorite links here, and I'll throw those in the chat too, is the learning portal and then the accessible campus as well. They have all kinds of great options of support, reading a little bit more about how to work with students with accommodations and disabilities and medical conditions. And I'm mindful I see Bert coming on, so I know I'm getting cut off right now. And that is it. So I kind of made my cutoff there, but open for any questions or comments.
I hope I'm not bringing the doom and gloom. You can, if
No,
people
not
want to
at
ask a question, fit it in.
I'm mindful I talked too much and too quickly, so I'm like, okay, I needed to do that. So I saw you and I was like, yes, I made the time.
That's great, Danielle. Thank you so much. I appreciated all of it. I think anyone who's in the situation of managing students will appreciate everything, and always a good reminder too. It kind of reminded me of what Kim said about the student that would walk in, late with a coffee, and sometimes you have, as a teacher, assumptions that you build in your mind quickly before you realize that some students either have an exceptionality or need some accommodations to give them a bit of guidance or help through education. So that's all of it is awesome. All right, we are winding down. We're so close to the end here. And next we have Kelly and Kim. I'm going to pass it back over to those two. We're going to give you a rocking good time.
Thanks so much, Bert, for that wonderful intro. Very exciting. So Kelly and I are the last presentation of the day, and we're very pleased to be here with you and to talk to you a little bit about reigniting the spark. So using podcasting to cultivate connections and create space for innovation, inspiration, and collaboration. So we think that podcasts can be a great channel for engaging faculty and staff. We wanted to kind of end the day by talking a little bit about engagement for ourselves as well. We've talked a lot about engagement for students. So there's great focus placed on engagement for students, but sometimes we forget that engagement most often begins with facilitators. Lots of data out there to suggest that students are most engaged when their facilitators are engaged. Engagement also extends beyond engagement with content, as today, Dr. Such. Oh dear. I think I just dropped off. Sorry. Hopefully I'm back.
You're back.
Okay. But it also extends to engagement with students and colleagues as well. So really important that we're thinking about how we engage ourselves.
Oh, this is me. Oops, sorry. So why do podcasts rock? So essentially, Kim and I started this podcast, which I just put in the chat, Time for Teaching podcast. And we were both listening to podcasts like regularly, and even before sort of the pandemic. And I know the pandemic sort of amped up a lot of people listening to podcasts, but mostly we were listening to podcasts for like entertainment. It was accessible for us, and it was also in our world, it was educational. So those are kind of the reasons that we latched onto it. And so other things that we really liked about podcasts is the ability to, as it says here, task stack or stacking our tasks, whereby we could do other things while still listening to a podcast. And I know others have mentioned that today too, but in particular for me, my commute is not that long, but I could certainly listen to a podcast between going to work and then coming home, and I could get a full podcast in, and it was really kind of enjoyable. That's what I liked to do. Podcasts also can be helpful with, as Nidhi Sachdeva shared with us earlier today, it can be a real opportunity for micro-learning. So it's an opportunity to connect with folks from around the world. It's an opportunity to hear voices that we may never be able to hear in maybe our professional development world. It's an opportunity for professional growth. And it's at least for me anyways, mostly it's educational, and I really like to listen to those kinds of podcasts.
Wonderful. So the other thing was we recognized a gap in our professional development. So we were developing sessions and offering those sessions out to our faculty. And this was kind of during the pandemic and also post-pandemic as well. And we were realizing it was getting harder and harder to fill seats in those sessions. So whether it was in-person, virtual, or even asynchronous learning, it was really difficult to get folks on board for those things. We know that faculty were and still are hungry for new tech, new information, connection, but many of us don't have capacity to attend PD. And so that's pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and during pandemic as well, particularly if folks aren't being compensated for their time. We have many NFT faculty here at Georgian, and so they're only paid for the hours that they're teaching and marking, so they don't have the capacity to attend the PD. So we also noticed some inequities. We realized that our in-person PD offerings were very Barrie-centric. So we have 7 campuses across Southern Ontario. And, oh, thanks, Ian. NFT equals non-full-time. Thank you, Ian and Mark. So we realized that because our CTL office is centered on the Barrie campus, that many of our offerings that were in person were offered in Barrie. So folks who were in Owen Sound wouldn't necessarily be able to drive all the way there for a 1-hour session. We also realized that even when we offered PD remotely, any time chosen could be exclusive for those who are teaching, working, or otherwise engaged during the synchronous sessions. So there are many folks who work at Georgian NFT non-full-time who teach 1 or 2 or maybe even 4 courses, but they have other jobs outside of the college as well. So they may be an active architect or an active electrician still working in their field, but teaching part-time at Georgian at the same time. So basically, we realized that our PD offerings weren't equitable for folks across all teaching categories, so full-time, non-full-time, etc. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to try to reduce those inequities as much as possible. And over to you, Kelly.
So in terms of promoting equity and accessibility, we also looked at ways in which we could access learning and information and thought, let's create a podcast because we liked it and we wanted to try it. But also it was a way for to help our faculty and staff access information potentially that they needed. We did start the podcast prior to the pandemic, but I believe we did, didn't we, Kim?
I think so.
It's
all a blur now.
I know, but it really ramped up for us as well during the pandemic and sort of really highlighted the needs for us. And so the goal that we felt with the podcast was really just for me, just in time and just enough. But in particular, when we thought about our Georgian folks specifically, it was really about just for us, like what do our folks need just when we have time for it, so folks could access it when they needed it, and then just enough. And so things like, keeping it to 20 to 30-minute podcast, give or take. Content, we had to make sure it was maybe 1 or 2 sort of content topics and that sort of thing. So that was our goal as we sort of grew through our learning.
So we want to just put all our cards on the table here and say that we literally started from the bottom. We're avid podcast listeners, but neither of us had any experience doing anything like that, whether it was even just like hosting a podcast or doing any of the what seemed like very complicated tech related to it. So we decided to just kind of jump in, which luckily for us worked in our favor. Our manager was supportive of it, and Kelly learned the technology really quickly, and we started marketing and we just kind of went with it. The one thing that we wanted to make really clear is that we felt so proud and grateful to be able to do the podcast. It's work that brings us so much joy. So the two of us have a lot of fun doing it. We always say the one thing that's consistent across every episode is our obnoxious laughter, because we really do have a lot of fun doing it. But even more than that, we were so grateful. So hearing from our faculty, learning about projects that people were doing, courses that they were designing, assessments that they'd created, and even conversations that they were having in their classes made us feel so joyful and inspired. We also found that it created space for folks from Georgian to have their voices and efforts amplified outside of their departments, or maybe even just beyond their desks. Most people who we asked started our conversation by saying, I don't really have anything important to say. And we learned very quickly once we coerced them onto the podcast that they had lots of very important things to say. And we really left every single episode feeling like our cups were so full, and we're so grateful to be able to do that work and to be able to share space with our amazing colleagues who we often don't get the opportunity to connect with on a regular basis. The other thing that this brought to our attention was how much we need community and connection. So as I said, our colleagues are doing incredible things, and without this reason, we never would have known about them. So whether it was an art show or it was just a strategy that someone was using in their course, it was all things that we would never have known about had we not taken the leap to do the podcast. it's also a reminder of how important the work that our institution does is for our students and also for us too. I still have many vivid memories of my own post-secondary career and pretty much every educational experience that I've had, and the people who I've connected with, the instructors who I felt really cared, and the peers who I got to know during my time in education. It also just felt really nice, especially post-pandemic, to chat, catch up, laugh, connect, and step outside of our comfort zones again, even though we both love working from home and staying in our home offices feels very comfy. We actually recorded from our home offices, but it was really nice to kind of step outside of our virtual comfort zones as well. The other thing that it sparked was lots of other projects, ideas, initiatives, and collaborations. So when we had the chance to connect with folks, we were like, wow, that sounds like an incredible idea. What can we do to help? Or can we get involved in some way? Or we have the perfect person from another department who would be a great fit for that. And the big thing is too, it brought us joy. It brought joy back to the work we do, which for some of us moved a little far out of reach during the pandemic. I think folks were in tech overload. And it was an opportunity for folks to really remember why they got into teaching and to feel really proud of the work that they were doing for the school and for their students as well.
And also what we discovered was connection does take work, but it is really a fundamental part of all of our jobs. I know we have a lot of connection with the military here today, and community and connection is part of all of what we do. So we are social creatures, and we thrive when we are connected and have a chance to talk with others and see what they're up to and see what they're doing. It also is a vital part of our students' learning experience, so helping them to have connections with others within their classroom as well, and then maybe even broader. And then just a vital part of our work experience is that human connection. And students feel most engaged when we hear that often from feedback surveys and stuff like that. The students feel engaged when their instructors are engaged or they seem interested and they think, oh, they're so cool. Like they're so interested, they're so engaged. They think this is so cool. I now think it's cool. So we also all deserve to enjoy and find fulfillment in the work that we do and the impact that we can have on our lives and kind of the people around us. And it can be huge. And I know Kim and I have had numerous conversations about that. And as Kim mentioned, we might finish a podcast and we just go, wow, that just felt so great, or that just filled my cup. And it really, really helped both of us for engagement as well.
So we'd like to invite you to consider where you find joy and fulfillment in your own work. I think sometimes we can get caught up in just the daily grind of just doing the things, filling out the applications, filling out the paperwork, doing the work that we have to do. And we sometimes forget that we got into the careers that we're in for a reason, and that there is lots of joy and fulfillment to be found. So we'd like to just create just a 10-second pause to invite you to consider what brings you joy in the work that you do. Is there a way that you can find or make some more time for that? And then the other thing is, do you have a colleague or a support system of folks you can lean on? Kelly and I are lucky that we have a wonderful team in the Center for Teaching and Learning and beyond. There's lots of friends of CTL here, folks who we just respect and appreciate tremendously. And those folks deserve to know that. So we'd like to invite you to consider taking a moment to reach out to send a message of gratitude to let those folks know how much you appreciate them and their friendship and how much joy they bring to your work environment. And that is all the information that we have for today. But if you have any questions, comments, or queries, we'd love to hear from you. Our email addresses are there. And if you want to start your own podcast, give us a shout. We're happy to share our very limited experience on it. Or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you have any other thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for your time. And I believe we're passing things back over to Bert, I think, to wrap up the Adventure Challenge.
Thanks, everybody.